So now we're going to talk about interest. So interest is the amount of money paid for the use of borrowing. So interest is actually, could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. So we talked earlier about assets and net worth. So remember how we talked about the word loan and how it's a bad thing? Well, the reason why the word loan are bad is because if you take out a loan, you are paying interest. If you are investing money, you are earning interest. So, like we talked about retirement funds and how that's investing money, that earns your interest, so that's why it's an asset. A loan takes away your money. So not only when you borrow $10,000 do you have to pay back the $10,000, but you have to pay interest on top of that, so you end up paying way more. So a few terms you need to know. Principal is the original amount of money invested or borrowed. Interest rate is a certain percent that must be paid on top of the principal. So there's two types of interest actually, and the first type we're going to talk about today is simple interest. So simple interest can be used by solving this formula. Principal times rate, or interest, I stands for interest, equals the principal times the rate, which is your percentage, times time, the length of time that it is invested or borrowed. So our time must be in years. So in order, if for some reason you have it in months, in order to convert months to years, you divide by 12 because there are 12 months in a year. So in the real world, mostly the time that most interest is calculated through compound interest, which we'll learn tomorrow. But compound interest is just simple interest calculated over and over again, which we are going to actually discover when we compare simple interest versus compound interest. But we're just going to talk them in wide ranges so we can understand what it looks like for right now. And then later on we'll get more discrete and see what the difference is. So Jordan invested $300. So that's actually his principal. It's what he started off with. At 8%, so your percent's your rate, and then his time is 4 years. How much money did he earn in interest? So, in order to calculate interest, which this formula is on the formula chart, we're going to use that for the first time this year. So, we just plug in what we know. We don't know our interest, so that stays the same. We know our principal is $300. We know our rate is 8%. We don't want to use it as a percent. We want to move it to a decimal because we never can multiply by a percent. We always have to change it to a decimal. And then times your time. So I just took what I knew and plugged it in. Sometimes you'll know your interest but not know your rate. You still do the same thing. You would plug it in. So what our interest equals, I like to multiply the easy numbers together first. So 300 times 4, which is 1,200, times 0.08. Then I multiply 1,200 times 0.08, and I get $96, which makes sense. It's 8% of $300. Well, 10% of $300 is $30. So, 4 years at $30 a year, it's almost $120. So that makes about sense. It's reasonable. I know the numbers aren't close, but if this number was $500, that wouldn't make sense. If it was $2, that wouldn't make sense. So by rounding up to 10% and using that math in my head, it makes me check my answer for reasonableness. So now, that's his interest. That's not his total investment. To find your total investment, well, how much did you originally invest? Well, he or she, I don't know which Jordan this is, originally invested $300, but then he gained $96 in interest. So now his total investment is $396, which is why you invest, is to gain that interest. Yeah, $96 isn't a lot over 4 years, but considering you only put $300 away, it is. We will look at and compare what the power of interest does for people when we look at retirement savings. Example number 2. Sorry, I have to skip over 3 first. Kylie took out a loan for $2,000. Ooh, bad kind of interest. Her interest rate was 3.1 for 5 years. So I have my principal, my rate, and my time. How much will she pay? So how much will the interest be? And what will she have to pay back? Like total investment, you add in the interest. You have to pay the principal plus the interest. So the interest equals PRT because it's simple interest. So we take the principal, which is $2,000, times it by 0.031, which is our rate as a decimal, and then our time is 5 years. I don't know my interest, so that still remains unknown, which I leave my variable as. So, like we did earlier, we're going to multiply our easy numbers together first, because I do not want to multiply a decimal twice. 2,000 times 5 is 10,000. 10,000 times 0.31 is, or it's 0.031, 310. So, makes sense. She pays about 3%, so that's about $60 every year for 5 years. That's about $310. So that's a reasonable answer. This is how much interest she's going to pay. Well, does she only pay interest? No. The lender would not make money if you only paid interest. What you pay back has to be your principal plus your interest, which is the same thing that happened over here. We took what she had originally, which is the principal plus the interest. So remember, interest either works for you or doesn't. In this case, it does not, because not only does she have to pay $2,000 back, but she has to pay another $310. So in all in total, she has to pay $2,310. All right, let's look at Craig. Craig earned $450 in interest from a $120 investment that earned 12.5 interest. So that's our rate. $450 in interest, that is our interest. That's not our time. Our time is our X. We want to know what that is. And we have our principal is $120. So we can still do the same thing. We have the same formula, simple interest formula. Interest equals principal times rate times time. Well, I fill in what I know. Well, this time I know my interest is $450. My principal is $1,200 or $1,200. My rate is 0.125% or 12.5%, which is 0.125. But I do not know my time. So I want to multiply these two numbers together. First, I get 150 times time. Well, we have a variable over here, which means we need to do the inverse operation to get rid of a number, which is dividing by 150. Each side divides by 150. So this is back to our solving equations. This is real life stuff. How long will it take you to pay it back? Okay. So that one's out. So we get that the number of time is going to be 3 years. It's going to take him 3 years to pay off that much interest.